Our next solutionary, I'd like to welcome to the stage John Farrell. He is co-director of the Institute for Local Self-Reliance and the director of the Energy Democracy Initiative. He is an expert in the economic and environmental benefits of local ownership of decentralized renewable power. He hosts the Local Energy Rules podcast, and he discusses monopoly power, energy democracy, and how communities can take charge to transform the energy system. John Farrell, welcome to the Solution Summit.
Oh, thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, we're thrilled you're here. And, it is entirely possible. We had a great conversation on the Climate Solutions Day. And part of that conversation was around the critical shift from fossil fuel economy, coal, oil, gas, into renewable energy economy, solar, wind, and water power. But we need to make that shift, but that's not a guarantee that there would be more broadened prosperity around the new renewable energy economy if we want to make sure it's not as concentrated as the oil companies have come and their control. So I'm very much looking forward to hearing from you. I welcome you to make a brief opening remarks, 4 minutes, and tell us a little bit more about the work you're doing.
I will do, Eleanor. Thank you so much. And I just have to confess, I do have a dog who's running my house. And I think my cat might be trying to open the door to outside, freaking the dog out. So if there's some barking in the background, I apologize. It's just one of those things about this era of being able to participate virtually, which I very much appreciate. So I just want to say broadly that this idea of local control over our economy, over the energy system I also like to think of it as self-determination, right? It means having meaningful choices. And I think saying that Americans like local control is sort of like saying they like freedom or apple pie or football. Like it's part of the definition of being American, and that Americans want local control over their energy future so that they and their communities can make decisions that matter to them. And at the Institute for Local Self-Reliance, we really describe local control over the energy system as energy democracy. One of the things that surprises me, though, is that despite what I see as sort of like a fundamental preference among Americans for freedom or energy democracy, and the fact that energy is so essential to modern life, Americans are really surprisingly tolerant of a very undemocratic energy system. And it costs us a lot. I just have 3 brief examples. One, 12 of the largest electric utilities have shut off the power to US households 5 million times in the past 3 years, even though just 1% of their shareholder dividends could have covered the cost of keeping those folks connected. The second thing is that evidence from the Haas Institute at University of California, Berkeley, suggests that investor-owned utilities, which include those 12 that were cutting folks off, generally charge US consumers anywhere from $2 billion to $20 billion a year more than is necessary just to pad the profits of their Wall Street shareholders. And then the third thing is that we know there's been some great coverage of this in the past year, but utilities are using that publicly granted monopoly that they have and our own money for paying on our electric bills to lobby against things like local clean energy in order to protect their market share. So I guess what I'd say in summary to those points is just that I think Americans want more local control over their energy system. They want more energy democracy because lacking that benefit is really costly. And one of the things I've noticed is that, when corporations exercise too much power over other facets of our lives, we have reasserted the benefits of local control. We have the Federal Trade Commission. It recently filed suit against Amazon for abusing its market power and the way it was overcharging customers and abusing independent sellers on its platform. And the federal government believes that by confronting Amazon's monopoly power, they can reduce costs for consumers, restore the vitality of independent businesses, and protect democracy. And I think we can see the same kind of thing if we have more local control of our energy system. We can reduce energy costs because people can produce their own power. We can increase economic opportunity because if we build local energy, we have to have the jobs in those communities doing that construction, building those solar panels or wind farms. We can address historic harms to communities by replacing dirty energy with clean power, especially in tribal communities and communities of color that have suffered the most under fossil fuel economy. And of course, local control of our energy means we can accelerate our progress in fighting climate change because local energy is actually really fast to build. Like the solar panels on my house went up in 2 days compared to how long it takes for very large scale energy. So I'll just wrap up my opening remarks with a highlight from a recent report that we published called Advantage Local. And in it, my colleague wrote, quote, if all small solar installed in the United States in 2021 had been locally owned, it could have created almost $7.5 billion in extra value for its host communities compared to outside ownership. So we see local control as leading to energy democracy and just as part of the American way.
That's terrific. And I love the work you're doing there at the Institute for Local Self-Reliance. You make such a powerful case about the value of local control of energy. You just wonder, why isn't it everywhere? And can you give us a sense of scale? Like, do you know how much of the energy in the country is under local control and how much of it is kind of these big utility companies? Do you have a sense?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the things that we have to recognize is that in a traditional fossil fuel economy, it was much more economical to build very large power plants. And so we concentrated capital and concentrated ownership in order to go that direction. So the story of the first half of the 20th century is basically getting bigger and concentrating ownership into larger and larger utilities, larger and larger power plants. And so local ownership was really hard. With renewable energy, though, the story is completely different. And that's one of the most exciting things about solar energy, which we talk about probably the most when we talk about local control, because you can have it at a scale of on your own rooftop, and yet the same panel that's on my roof can be part of a giant solar array that's owned by utility companies. Well, I don't know that I have an exact fraction for you. I would guess it's somewhere between like 20 to 40% of solar projects are built on like residential and commercial properties. They might not all be specifically locally owned, as in like I have title to those solar panels, but a huge fraction of the solar energy that we built and that we've put on the electricity system is locally owned. And because of the fact that it can be done at a large and a small scale. Of our other technologies, it's not quite as much probably. You know, wind power tends to have big economies of scale. You really want to be higher in order to capture that better wind resource. But with solar, the possibility is really there. And with things like energy storage and a way that we can use smart technology to combine customers together, we have the possibility of really serving a lot of our big needs, whether that's fighting climate change or just meeting electric grid needs by doing lots of small scale things, but in a very big way.
That's fantastic. And I know you wrote this atlas called the Energy Self-Reliance States, which is a state by state atlas showing the renewable energy potential in each state and how really every state could meet its own electricity needs with renewable energy inside its state borders. Could you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. The funny thing is we've actually done 3 editions of that report, and it's been interesting just to watch the evolution over time with the improvement of technology. I think when I first published that back in 2009, about 2/3 of states could get to 100% of their electricity needs from in-state renewables. And thanks to the advancements in solar and wind technology, it's well over 100% now in just about every state. What I think the biggest lesson from that report, though, I mean, one is I think for some people, it's still surprising to realize just how much resource we have in every place that we can tap into. That the earliest, information about Indiana, for example, they said basically there was no possibility to do wind power in Indiana at all. And now there's several hundred megawatts of wind power providing electricity to Indiana customers. But I think the real learning that I've had from doing that report and the work that we've done since is the problem that we have is this mismatch between the local resource that every state has to meet that need and lacking local control in order to tap that resource. Because the truth is that the folks who control the energy system, the utility companies, mostly investor-owned utilities that serve most Americans and that own most of the power generation resources, they're not so concerned about where we get that energy from. They're concerned about whether or not their shareholders will make money with the kind of energy that they're going to sell. And so they're fine with, we're going to buy coal power from North Dakota, or we're going to buy gas from overseas, or we're going to import gas from outside the state in order to fuel gas-fired power plants. And so the lesson I think from that report is, yes, it's really amazing what the potential is, but if we actually want to seize that potential, we really need to focus on what are the rules of the system that will enable us to do so, to take advantage of that opportunity in every state.
Well, that is so true. And it leads me to the next question. It's kind of a bigger picture, but on the same track. If you were advising government leaders, mayors, governors, on what needs to be done regarding local control of energy. What are your top recommendations for action for government leaders to encourage greater local control of energy?
I'll start at the most local level with mayors and cities. And the thing that I just want to say to any mayor that might be paying attention is figure out what leverage you have and wield every bit of it that you've got. Because the truth is, a lot of our energy decisions, our energy policy decisions are made at the state and the federal level, but cities actually have a lot of power. They have power over siting and permitting, for example. They have the power of the budget. And you have seen a number of cities, Minneapolis, Portland, Seattle, create climate-oriented funds that are all about capturing the value of that local energy resource and helping people reduce their energy bills and produce more energy locally. So figure out that leverage that you've got. And how can you push the utility company to help meet your local goals? Because the truth is a lot of these utilities don't pay attention, but you can make them pay attention. And we've seen a lot of cities do that in some very impressive ways. Up at the state level, where we do more of our policy making around energy, I'd say one of the most important things that should happen and is happening is figuring out how to hold monopoly utilities accountable and to protect consumers. And we've seen legislation that passed just this year in Colorado, in Connecticut. It's being considered now in other states as well. It's often called utility accountability legislation. And it does some fairly simple but really important things, like say, hey, utility, if you're going to go join a trade group like the American Gas Association that's out there lobbying to burn more gas in a way that really harms our climate and our communities, you can't charge ratepayers for that. You have to pay out of your own shareholder pockets. Or if you're going to lobby our state government and ask for things like for subsidies for your gas plant or your coal plant or your nuclear plant, again, you can't ask ratepayers to pay for those kinds of things. And it includes some other provisions as well to ensure that utilities make investments that are more closely in the public interest, which has been really difficult. So I would say, absolutely, we've got to get folks paying more attention to the way that these utilities control and manage the system and take back some of that control. The second thing I would say, and this is certainly more ambitious, is to say we really need to restructure our electricity system more than we have already. So we got to start on it about 20 years ago, where we said, hey, maybe the one utility doesn't need to own everything, from the meter on our house to the power lines that go up to the power plant and the power plant itself. Maybe we could actually break up some of those functions to help reduce the power of that one entity. Well, the thing that we really need to do now is figure out how do we allow for competitive provision of services where the technology allows. We see in a couple of states, California and Texas, for example, they've been able to help avoid blackouts and to reduce energy costs for all consumers on the grid and save individual customers money who sign up to participate together as a group and to agree like, hey, I'm using this smart thermostat. I give this company the ability to like turn down my AC or something like that in response to grid needs. I get paid for that. And then the whole grid benefits because it reduces demand on the grid and avoids the use of really expensive power plants. So we need to get more of that going. And the sad truth is that utilities have blocked in most states the ability to have that kind of competition. And then the second and even more important thing is that we need independent oversight of the energy system, especially what's called the distribution grid. So if you think of the poles and wires that are like in your alley, in your backyard, around the city that you drive around, that's where all the exciting stuff is happening in the energy system. That's where we plug in community solar and rooftop solar and batteries and all that kind of stuff. And the utility still manages that as a monopoly, even though it has a terrible conflict of interest in wanting to actually prefer its own solutions and its own big power plants. And so we really need to think about, can we trust the utility to continue to be in charge of that? And when we've seen lots of evidence that they manage it poorly and to their own advantage, when we actually really need to use that system, that connective grid, that platform for everybody's benefit.
That's great, John. Well said. And we've got a question here. The title of the atlas that you publish is called Energy Self-Reliant States. That's the state-by-state atlas of renewable energy potential within each state. Can people find that on the Institute for Local Self-Reliance website, John?
Yes.
Yeah, check out that. It's an amazing group and been doing great work for 50 years.